across the building tonight. Let the devil know that you're encouraged. Let him know that you're encouraged. Let him know. Hallelujah. I don't know about you tonight, but somebody may be crying, but I come to let you know that God can make it all right. Ooh, yes. Be encouraged. Oh, he will. He'll make it all right. Yeah, yeah. I know right now it's impossible to see, but God is gonna work it out if you just believe. Remember this one thing while you're going through. If God delivered Daniel, guess what? He'll do the same for you. Hey. No matter what's going on. No matter what's going on. He'll make it all right. Said it in his word. You gotta stay strong. Be encouraged. No matter what's going on. No matter what goes on. He'll make it all right. That's what he said. But you gotta stay strong. That's what he said. He told me. Hold on. Trouble don't last always. These trials are just a test. These trials. Just a test of your faith. So stand strong and dry your weeping eyes. 'Cause joy comes in the morning and everything is gonna be all right. Be encouraged. Hey, hey. He'll make it all right. That's what he said. That's what he said. That's what he told me. He told me. Oh, you gotta be encouraged. You got to be encouraged. Somebody got bills tonight. matter what you're going through, I know that you can stand. For your life is in his hands. Listen. I know that I can stand. I know that I can stand. No matter what comes my way. No matter what may come my way. Jesus, my life. My life is in your hands.
Good afternoon. Praise the Lord. It's another Tuesday that the Lord has spared our lives. And we have gathered again to take a look at this topic, the power of positive relationships. But first, let me say again, good afternoon, and thank you so much for carving out this time, guarding this time to study. Praise God for the members of this church who continue to study. And then also we want to welcome all of our friends and visitors who not necessarily members of the church, this church, but they are members of the family of the Lord Jesus Christ. And so we are sisters and brothers in Christ, and they've decided to study with us. And so welcome, glad to see you studying with us today. My prayer for you is that as you are being prayerful about your going and your comings, you're also masking up, you are washing up, and you are backing up in terms of how we are interacting with one another. Let's keep others safe by keeping ourselves safe. And so be smart, be sensible, and please, sisters and brothers, be safe. So welcome to our Noonday Bible study, where we've been talking about Ken Blanchard's book, Well Done. And of course, we've been doing this analysis in terms of what works with those whales, in terms of getting them to do their very best and to be their very best, also works in our relationships. And I know we've been talking about the number of relationships we have, the nature of those relationships, and even the nuances of those relationships. And yet it is possible for us to have a win-win situation with each of the relationships that we have. And so today we want to say a little bit more about building trust. We introduced that on last Tuesday, and so we want to say more about that today. Anne Marie Butler is a global business consultant. She travels the globe sharing with executives, managers, and others who work in the corporate world about leadership strategies. And one of her topics is the importance of generating positive energy, motivating others. And to be honest, when I was reading Blanchard's book, and there's a segment of the book she's featured, I thought about the impact Jesus had and continues to have on every life he encounters. If we've had any type of encounter with Jesus, our lives are never the same. And of course, our goal as his sons and daughters is to ultimately hear him say, well done. Not just when we see him face to face, but we want that to in some way manifest itself in the here and now. Not just in the not yet, but even in the here and now. We want to hear him say, well done. And so we're thinking about these relationships. And so prior to doing a workshop, she put her participants through an exercise. And she had everyone to stand. And she said, now what I want you to do is I want you to greet each other in a way that demonstrates that person is really not that important to you, and that you are looking for other people in the room who are more important. And she says the people began to move around in the room, and obviously it was not a lot of conversation, not a lot of laughter, but people were moving about, but she could tell, and the people would respond later when she talked to them about it. The people were responding as if, you know, there was something wrong with them. That's the way they felt, and everyone was just back and forth looking for someone else, not being excited for the person that they had encountered, etc. Then she stopped them, and then she reversed it. She says, now what I want you to do is to greet one another as though they are a long-lost friend and you're glad to see them. And obviously there was a shift in terms of the mood in the room. There was laughter. There was warmth. There was positivity. There was it was the noise was loud, and when it came time for her to bring the room back to order, the people continued because of the positive energy. And so when she finally got everybody's attention, she sat them down and she asked them a couple of questions. One was, what was the difference between the two? People responded. The first, it was just negative energy. It didn't feel good. But then the second, it was just the opposite. It was positive energy. And so she was just sharing with the people the difference when individuals take it upon themselves to bring about a positive vibe in every relationship. She talks about the motivating factor and how you and I, based upon our focus, we can bring about positive energy. Again, with the first set of instructions, it was negativity. But with the second focus, it was positivity. And that was the energy. And so she talks about, again, how we can make this decision to be the ones who lead in bringing about a positive vibe in all of our relationships. And she gives us several results, positive results, of us taking upon ourselves to impact lives the way Jesus did. And we'll talk about how he impacted lives in a moment. If you look at Roman number 1, interacting with others in a whole new way. And that is, the whole new way is that we look for the good. We highlight the good. We focus on the good. And here are the results. Number 1, we build positive relationships that way. Number 2, we increase people's energy. And number 3, it changes the way individuals perform. There's a greater level of improvement. And so the question becomes, who's motivating who? If you and I are going to have win-win relationships, we cannot wait for somebody else to do it. We need to make up our minds that here is another way that we can be like Jesus. Jesus saw the good that was in individuals. Jesus saw everyone as being important, everyone as being valuable, everyone as being significant, because he knew that everyone had been created in God's image and in God's likeness. In fact, that's why he came. Okay? Is to remind people of the love of God. God so loved the world gave his only begotten Son. Whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. And so we can take on that type of disposition in terms of we want to be like Jesus, in that we want to have a positive, lasting impact on the lives that we come in contact with. So let's look briefly how Jesus impacted lives. You can go ahead and put the list up. You think about the 12. I mean, those 12 men, I mean, these were individuals that had we known what Jesus knew, would have not selected them. You just go down the list. Matthew, he was a somewhat of a gangster of his time. He was not an honest individual. You look at Peter. I mean, we know about Peter. I mean, and you just go down the line. And these individuals, these are the types of individuals that Jesus used to turn the world upside down. He had that type of impact. When he was teaching them, they couldn't get the lessons. He was trying to move them forward. They were going backward. I mean, it was all of that. And yet, Jesus decided that he would use these type of individuals and he would change their lives forever. And they would in turn ultimately begin to change the lives of others. And you had this domino effect of once you have had an encounter with Jesus, your life is never the same, and the same impact that he had on your life through him, power of his Spirit, we can have the same impact on the lives of others. So you just go down the list. The man at the pool, they were 38 years. Jesus met that man, changed his life. The woman of Samaria, Nicodemus, woman with the issue of blood, Zacchaeus. You just go down the list. And Jesus had a great impact on the lives of everyone he met. And I believe that we can have that same type of impact through him on the lives of others. It's just a matter of us deciding what type of impact are we going to have. Who's going to be responsible for the positivity? Who's going to be responsible for motivating others? Who's going to be responsible for seeing the best in others and focusing on the good that is in others as opposed to the bad? Who's going to take that role? I think as light and salt, that's the call. That's part of the call. That's a way of us working out that call, walking out that call in the Great Commission and the call that God has on his people. So, again, that statement of summation. After meeting Jesus, no one was the same. Now, Anne Marie Butler, she has what is called the ABCs of performance. And again, in doing this workshop, she talks about if you're going to bring about positive energy, if you're going to motivate individuals, if you're going to inspire them and all of that, she says you're going to have to take the lead in this. And so one of the factors that she talks about is the ABCs of performance. And so the A, she says, is called the activator, which you have there. It means whatever gets performance going. Whatever gets performance going. Now I want you to think about the number of relationships you have, the nature of those relationships, and even the nuance of those relationships. Now, with every relationship that we have, she suggests that the activator is for us to, in some way, and Jesus did this. It just blew my mind. Is for us to have clear expectations of those relationships. Think about that just for a moment. Jesus had clear expectations of every relationship he had with individuals. You say, how, Pastor? Jesus says, if anyone will come after me, they must first deny themselves, take up the cross, and follow me. That was the expectation of that relationship. For Jesus, the expectation of the relationship was faithfulness. That was the expectation. It was not perfection. It was faithfulness. Then they bring up this conversation, this question, well, who's your family? And Jesus says, my sister or my brother, my mother or my father. Talking about relationships, family. He says, are those who do the will of my Father. That's the expectation. Faithfulness, not perfection. He goes on, he talks about, he says this, take no thought of what you will eat, drink, or wear. Your Father knows what you need. He says, but seek first the kingdom of heaven and what is right according to God, and all these things will be. Jesus is simply talking about expectations. And so, as Ann suggests, in all of our relationships, she says, this is the activator, and that is whatever gets performance going. Every relationship that you and I have, you and I can have a general conversation based upon the nature of that relationship and the nuance of that relationship. You and I can have a basic conversation about what are the expectations of that relationship. I guarantee you. And once we agree on the expectations of the relationship, everybody feels good about the nature of that relationship. Now, our expectations are different based upon the nature of the relationship. You think about the relationship that we have with a friend. The expectation of that relationship is not the same as the expectation of having a spouse or having children or parents. Okay? Different when you have co-workers. Different when you're in ministry with people. Every relationship, we should have expectations. And once we agree on those expectations, then everybody in the relationship knows what to do and what not to do. It's simple, but yet it's profound. Again, when Jesus was here, when he was moving about, in and out, Jesus laid the groundwork for what he expected of his followers. Okay? Now think about the different relationships we have. How many of those relationships have we talked about expectations? Think about this for a moment. Sometimes we have not even talked about expectations of spouses, of husband and wives. We have not talked about expectations. Sometimes with our children, we have not talked about expectations. I mean, it could be something as simple as, okay, yes, you live here, yes, you are my child, but here are the expectations. What happens if the child doesn't know why? I didn't know I was supposed to make up my bed. I mean, yeah, I got a job, but you my mom, my dad. I didn't know I was supposed to at least give y'all some on food. I mean, but again, the point of it is, how do we establish common ground within these relationships so that everyone knows the expectations? And once we know what is expected of us, we tend to deal with each other differently. Okay? You got two people bringing in income. I mean, what happens if, well, I thought my money was my money and your money was your money and you handle all this and I just do whatever. But what happens when you lay the groundwork, when you have clear expectations? Everyone wins. And so what she does there, she talks about, again, the A, which is an activator, and that is people talking about the expectations of the relationship. Think about, co-workers. Co-workers have expectations of each other. If they're working on the same project, I mean, whose responsibility is this and whose responsibility is that? And everybody knows their responsibility, so this person stays in their lane and this person stays in their lane. This person not trying to do that person's job. This person not trying to do anyone else's. I mean, it just works. She talks about it as the activator. Sometimes in our relationship, it reminds me of Alice in Wonderland. You remember Alice in Wonderland? When Alice, she comes to this fork in the road, and there's the cat there, and she says to the cat, which path should I take? And the cat says, well, where are you going? And Alice says, I don't know. And the cat says, well, it really doesn't matter. When you think about our relationships, think about those relationships. And sometimes that's why maintenance is so high in some of our relationships. It's because we hadn't talked about expectations. That's why sometimes it's like people are trying to get over on us. That's why we feel like we're being used and abused and all of that. No expectations. So I want to encourage you to think about expectations of the types of relationships you have. Just have a general conversation about that. Okay? I mean, one of the things that we try to do at this church as it relates to members, one of the expectations is that you complete new members class. That's an expectation. One of the expectations we have of leaders is you are actively engaged in the life of the church. That's expectation. One expectation we have of members in ministry that you come to ministry meetings. Those are clear expectations. And so just like we have those expectations in our religious relationship, why not have those same type of expectations in our other relationships? Okay. And find out the common ground, and somebody's going to have to take the lead in doing it. And I suggest we do it as a people of God. That's what Jesus did. You had no issue with Jesus because he told you where he was coming from. He shared, even today, he is still speaking to us concerning his expectations of us in this relationship. So the A here again, activator, that is, whatever gets performance going. And performance, Ann was simply talking about, what we do, how we act, the different roles in the relationship. Okay? But then she moved to B, and that is behavior. Now, we're talking about whales and how they perform and all of that. So what works for whales also works for people. And so when you think about what those whales would do at SeaWorld, they would jump in the air, they would give the trainers a ride, they would use their tails to splash water on the people. All of that was part of behavior. And so when she talks about behavior, she's in essence just saying the performance that occurs. That is to say, what individuals do. Now, based upon the expectations, then individuals began to respond to those expectations with how they act, how they behave, and so on and so forth. So let's just give an example of some of our relationships. You think about, again, you go with church relationships. How do individuals perform? How do they behave based upon the expectations? Okay. So then, let's say, for example, you have expectations of leaders that you do not have of followers. And when leaders are holding a position of responsibility, yet they behave in ways that goes against the expectation, then you have to have a conversation. Because the behavior is not lining up with the expectation. Now, if there was no expectation, then you really couldn't hold them accountable, right? So think about our relationships. Think about what people get away with in our relationships because we have not established expectations. I mean, we just have not done that. So here again, she is talking about the performance or the response of others based upon the expectations. Those whales jump into the air. They give these trainers rides. They do all of these things. They do all of this as a result of they've already established performance. They've already established goals. They've already in some way demonstrated with those animals that they're not going to hurt them. They can trust them. And so they have a great, the foundation of their relationship, that is a great one. So I want to encourage us to do the same thing as it relates to, number one, the activator. Just talking about how we would treat each other and so forth, expectations, goals, and then the behavior, and then this next step she calls C is consequence. And that is how we respond to individuals' performance or to individuals' behavior. Now, she raises an interesting point here because she says, she raises this question all around the world, and the answer is the same. And that is, how do you know when you're doing a good job? And she says, the response is when no news is good news. That is to say, she says, most of the people she trained say that 80, 90% of the time when they're doing something good, their co-workers, their bosses don't say anything. But it says that they don't say anything until they do something wrong. And so in essence, no news is good news. Now, according to her ABCs, there are four types of four kinds of consequences, and she talks about how important the C is. And again, the C is for consequence. She says that this is critical to us having win-win relationships. This is important. If we're going to take the lead in being the motivator in our relationship, this is very important. And here again, I want to talk about Jesus. The number one goal, the number one desire for every child of God is to hear God say, well done, good and faithful servant. That's all we want. We're not, we're not thinking about no pearly gates, walking down streets of gold. Well, we're not concerned about the color of our robe. I mean, all of those, we're not concerned about that. We want to hear him say, well done, good, faithful servant. And so, God does in fact say, well done here. As we are faithful in living for him, he says, well done. As we are faithful in giving to him, he says, well done. As we are faithful in how we treat one another, the least of these, how we look after the most vulnerable among us, he is saying, well done now. Now let's put that in the context of our individual relationships. Think about that. Think about the relationship we have with our children. When our children do something good, we should say, well done. As it relates to our co-workers, when our co-workers, we're working together on projects and assignments and all of that, and they come through on their responsibility, we ought to celebrate that. Then think about our spouses. Think about our siblings. All of these different relationships that we have. If we are siblings and we're caring for our parents, or we're taking care of the family property, or whatever it is, and everybody holding their end of the bar. We ought to celebrate that. We ought to celebrate that. Same is true when it comes to spouses. We ought to celebrate each other. I mean, it shouldn't just be, well, you know, that's what you ought to be. No. God doesn't treat us that way. God doesn't just say, yeah, you ought to praise me, and that's it. But there are results of praising him. The fruit of living for him. He brings about a harvest in the lives of his people who serve him. Okay? So, and all I'm saying is, we can take the lead in bringing about a positive vibe in our relationships. It is by focusing on the positive, celebrating the positive. Okay? Well, she says there are 4 kinds of consequences. You can put that up if you don't have it up already. Remember now, she asked that question. She says, how do you know when you're doing a good job? And 80 to 90% of her workshop participants said, when the people don't say anything. Said, but, and so in essence, no news, you know, is good news. But she says there are 4. Here's the first response, and that is no response. How many of you are familiar with that? No response. The second is a negative response. Number 1, no response is like, okay. But then negative response, that is, you know, well, that was okay, but I really wish you would have. That's a negative response. Now think about how those whales would respond if these trainers, again, and we talked about this, if these whales are having a not so good day, okay, and they don't punish them, but they allow them to do something else that they do well, and that's how they encourage them. Okay? So that's a way of focusing on the positive. So instead of there being a negative response, okay, we focus on the good of it. Sometimes you and I don't have to bring up the negative, although we know there's an opportunity to do it. Just don't bring it up. Look, think about Jesus. Think about Jesus. How many times those guys dropped the ball? How many times? And he kept them. He kept them. He gave them another chance. He gave them another chance. God is still doing that today. How many times have we dropped the ball? I mean, does God set up, you know what? I'm so sick and tired of you, I don't know what to do. God doesn't say, God doesn't say, you know what, sometimes I think, you know, I must have been having a bad day when I created you. I know I wasn't thinking when I made you. What was I thinking about when I called you to ministry? You messed up again? Oh my goodness, I got to do it again for you? God is not that way. So why not take the same grace, mercy that we get from God and manifest that same grace and mercy in our relationships? Here's the other response. She says, redirection. That's the example I gave you about the whales. They redirect. So there's a way for us to redirect in these relationships. And then lastly, the positive response. Okay? Now, I want media to put on the screen Philippians chapter 4, verses 8 and 9. Philippians chapter 4, verses 8 and 9. And there you will see Paul says, whatsoever. And he goes down the list. True, right, honorable. He goes down the list, down the list, down the list. And then he finally says, think on these things. So you and I have this option as to what we can focus on in our relationships. All of our relationships. Okay? And so I want to encourage you today to make the commitment to take on the role as motivator in the relationship. Be the leader of making sure that there is a win-win in all of our relationships. You and I can impact lives the way Jesus did. We can do it. We can do it. Okay? Now, Tuesday, I'm going to talk about why the consequences has such the great the greatest impact on how we respond in our relations and how we respond in our relationships. Today I did deal with the four types of responses that Ann Butler lists, but Tuesday I'm going to talk about why consequences are so important, especially if we want to be the type of individuals who focus on the positive. Trust me, there are more than enough people who focus on negativity. Listen, that line is long. Don't get in that line. But be the person. I want to challenge you. So I'm challenging myself. I want to be the one who focuses on the positive. Now let me say this. Now, we don't have to always point out the negativity to make sure people know it's there. Trust me. They know. They know. So why not lift the positive? You know, why not bring out the positivity? You know, why not be the encourager? Why not be the motivator? Hasn't God been there for you? Hasn't God been there for me? And hasn't God put other people in our lives who push us? Okay? Who encourage us, who bring out the best in us. And so let's make the commitment to impacting lives the way Jesus did. Did we have any questions? I've been going, I have not even paused to see if we have any questions. So basically the gist of what we've been saying about today is that you and I can motivate others to be their best, to do their very best. We can do it. And so we can make this decision to, in fact, do that in all of our relationships. And again, relationships are different, so the type of expectations are going to be different because our relationships are different. Relationships, you know, a marriage is different, very different. That's a relationship. It is very different than a relationship we have with siblings. Just like being a parent, is that relationship is different than being a co-worker. But they're all relationships. And so we can develop, have a sense of clear expectations of each of those relationships. And I guarantee you, if we do more of that, we have a better chance of having win-win relationships. All right, today is Tuesday. Tomorrow is Wednesday. Tomorrow night, we look forward to our Bible study time at 7 p.m. God bless you. Have a great Tuesday afternoon. Take care.
So we come to tell you tonight, be blessed. In fact, just look at three people around you. Tell them, be blessed. Be blessed. Be blessed.
Bishop, I was on an airplane on my way to see you, and the Lord began to speak to me and said, write these words as encouragement to the saints around the world.
Be blessed, my brother. Be blessed, my sister. Be blessed wherever this life leads you. Let me encourage you. Let me speak life to you. You can depend on God to see it through. And
Somebody tonight, all of the hurt and the pain that you've gone through, God's got an answer for you tonight. You might be hurting, might be crying, you might be worrying,
and frustrated too.
Let me encourage you.
Let me encourage you.
Let me speak life to you.
To you. You can depend on God to see you through. You can depend on me
To pray for you.
to pray for you.
Oh, I want you to know right now, I'm going to keep on praying. Keep on praying. I'm watching and I'm praying.
I'm gonna keep on
I'm going to pray.
praying.
Even in the midnight hour, early in the morning.
I'm gonna keep on praying for you.
You can see you through.
You can depend on me.
To pray for you. Now let me prophesy for a minute.
I see you in the future.
And you look better.
You look better.
I see you walking in faith.
See you walking in favor
And prosperity too.
and prosperity too.
This is for you, New Orleans. Let me encourage you.
Let me encourage you.
Let me speak life.
Let me speak life to you. You can depend on God to see you through. You can depend on me to pray for you.
And Bishop, riding on that airplane that day, I thought about everything